Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. In a few moments, I'm going to hand over to the ROKBOX team for their presentation, but I just wanted to say a few words initially about why we at AXA XL believe that their product is important to us, and by extension, all of us here in the room today. AXA XL is, of course, always looking for innovative solutions for its clients, and ROKBOX seems to represent a pragmatic, modern solution to a historic problem that will ensure better outcomes for our clients and for the environment. As you will have no doubt seen on one of the billboard screens dotted around the building on your way up here today, AXA Group's purpose is to act for human progress by protecting what matters. We believe that wider use of ROKBOX will not only better protect the assets that matter to our clients, but also reduce their environmental impact. The traditional means of shipping art using wooden crates results in a significant amount of waste, as these containers are typically not designed to last, and in a majority of cases cannot or will not be reused. By being lighter, stronger, and more readily recyclable, ROKBOX's containers offer greater sustainability, quality, and functionality. Using their containers eliminates the waste by moving to recyclable products, as well as significantly reducing CO2 emissions. A lighter product, of course, also reduces shipping costs and the emissions associated with transporting heavier items. Furthermore, producing wooden crates at scale requires a huge amount of timber, which can be difficult to source responsibly and can carry a large logistical carbon footprint. ROKBOX is carbon neutral, with all emissions from manufacturing offset, reducing environmental impact and mitigating ethical risks. As such, a move towards products like ROKBOX supports the current AXA XL sustainability strategy, which is entitled Roots of Resilience. And that strategy focuses on protecting natural ecosystems, addressing climate change, and embedding sustainable practices across our operations. In addition to the sustainability aspect, of course, mitigating and protecting against risk is fundamental to AXA XL's business, and indeed the insurance industry at large. Traditional means of moving fine art using wooden crates has been shown to us all over the years to be less than optimal. For example, I can't imagine there's very many people in the room today who have not been involved in a claim involving an artwork and forklift trucks. But ROKBOX can mitigate some of these types of risks. As an industry leader, we feel we have a responsibility to leverage our expertise and help bring the market together to encourage the use of more sustainable solutions, as with events like this. Our aim is to champion the widespread adoption of sustainable solutions, driving a collective effort towards a more environmentally conscious future. So without further ado, I will hand over to Andrew Strumentoff, ROKBOX's CEO. Thank you very much.
Cool, there's a lot of you. Good morning. I'm Andrew Strumentoff, one of the founders of ROKBOX. This morning, we're going to talk a bit about how ROKBOX came about, what it is, how it works, its protective and sustainability credentials, and about ROKBOX Loop, a collaboration and partnership of art shippers and ROKBOX, championed by AXA XL and the Gallery Climate Coalition. We will have a demo and questions after. Sorry, I'm quite nervous. Firstly, thank you very much to AXA XL, and not just for this event. It's years of advice and insights. Your support has been transformational. It means a great deal to be here today. Insurance is the greatest enabler of businesses around the world. And without insurance, a lot of stuff simply wouldn't happen. Insurance makes stuff happen. And it also feels like we have gone full circle, because ROKBOX was started because of some insurance claims. I started working in art about 25 years ago. I worked as an exhibitions coordinator, working with artist studios, collectors, art fairs, doing Frieze, Basel, Venice Biennales, and creating huge piles of waste wherever I went. From 2004 to 2009, I worked for Gagosian in London. Mostly, it was exciting, interesting, and fun, until something went wrong. The first thing to go really wrong was a painting that had to go urgently from Switzerland to New York on consignment for a sale. But the wrong size screws were used to fix the painting into the T-frame. A tiny oversight. The difference between a 3/8 of an inch and a 1/4 of an inch actually is an 1/8 of an inch. In Frankfurt, Lufthansa knocked the box and the painting fell out of the T-frame. And then it rattled all the way to New York and was a total loss. $12 million. Verity and I, one of my colleagues here, were later subpoenaed to a court case in New York for this 1/8 of an inch of an oversight. Size does matter. The second very bad and sad thing was one of our artists was lending a painting to an exhibition in Seoul, and he loved that painting. He was a late career artist, it was very precious to him. And I was sent to go and pick up the painting with a fine art shipper. When I got to his house, and he looked at me and he said, "Please take care of this." And I promised him I would. We had a museum case, we had an air ride truck, white gloves, we had everything. And it was all fine. It went to the exhibition, got rave reviews, people liked it, but on the way back at the airport, there was a rainstorm. And what we know now is that there was a little crack at the top of the museum crate, and a little bit of water got inside. The painting couldn't be restored. During the post-mortem, everyone was screaming, "How can this happen?" The loss wasn't, we'd spent all the money we could. We'd done everything correctly, but we couldn't stop it raining. The loss wasn't just financial, it was almost the relationship with the estate. I'd given my word, and both the paintings and my word were broken, and it was awful. Both those artists are dead. They can't remake those paintings. The losses for the estates, the collectors, the galleries, and the insurance industry was not just large financially, but it strained relationships, held up agreements. It was very painful. I looked around at the vast piles of very expensive rubbish we had at every exhibition and every art fair and thought, this just isn't right. Over the years, people have said to me, "Oh, ROKBOX, what a brilliant idea." I don't think it is. I think it's absolutely obvious. No one puts their cash in a wooden safe. No one puts their kids in wooden car seats or goes for a motorbike ride wearing a wooden helmet. That ROKBOX here is actually made out of the same stuff that you make motorcycle helmets out of. It's pretty good at protecting your brain in an accident and pretty good at protecting paintings. So there was clearly a need for better protective art packaging. And I knew that if we could make that better protective art packaging reusable, then by nature it would bring down cost and it would bring down the environmental burden. So the first thing we did is went to the insurance industry, and they were helpful, always very discreet. But it turned out there were many, many tales of punctures through pictures, packaging coming loose in transit, water ingress, flood, cases being dropped or toppled, fixing snappings, psychopathic forklift drivers in airline sheds, over-enthusiastic knife-wielding customs agents, etc., etc., etc. We had the list of what was going wrong in the real world. We created our design briefs around this. The insurance market, you lot, were not just helpful but fundamental to our product development path. We also read the literature, Art in Transit, National Gallery, Washington, and then worked with conservators, industrial designers, and technicians to model, prototype, and test. I now know this. Those insurance claims that started all of this, the wet and rattling paintings, wouldn't have happened if they were in our boxes. I'm going to hand you over to Verity to explain about testing.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm Verity. I am from a shipping and registrar background, having worked initially for Momart and then working for two of the big American galleries who are here in London, Gagosian Gallery and Pace Gallery. I also did a short stint working for a family who collect, which was very eye-opening. When I'm chatting to people, about why using ROKBOX can avoid those costly and heartbreaking insurance claims that Andrew just spoke about, and which I sadly am also familiar with. How do I know, hand on heart, that ROKBOX is the safest option to be telling these people about? Or as one of my colleagues delightfully put it to me yesterday, how do we know it's the Durex of the packaging world? Quite simply, we proved it. And so I don't need to be a skilled salesperson with the gift of the gab, which I obviously am not. The fact is, I was there when we did the testing. I've seen the evidence time and time again, and I know the kind of mistakes that were happening out in the real world with traditional wooden crates. So our first job was to determine the testing criteria, so how we were going to test our prototypes. Because if we hadn't have done this, how would you know that our testing was reliable and consistent? So we went to the University of Leicester and we spoke to their engineering department, and they helped us design a testing brief for all the different tests we wanted to carry out. And we also benchmark tested our crates against high-quality wooden museum spec crates. Once we had our instructions on how to do those tests, or recipes as I like to think of them, we took our prototype crates and the wooden ones to an independent testing facility called Tuvsud. So there's a little old ROKBOX, which we really were a small company in those days, at this really fancy independent testing facility, and their clients are the Ministry of Defence, Airbus, and Rolls-Royce, and ROKBOX. And so began this really long and really costly iterative process of design and testing. So we take our prototype, test it alongside the wooden crates, and then redesign, tweaking and perfecting as we learn more and more, because believe it or not, it didn't all happen perfectly the first time. And we kept going and we kept going until we got the results that we wanted consistently. Fast forward 6 years to where we are now. I think we've aged a lot more than 6 years. We now have ROKBOX Original in 6 sizes, ROKBOX Lite in 2 sizes, plus the ability to put a light inside an Original, as you see here. We also have 3 different hardware systems for securing artwork within. So that can take single artworks or multiple artworks. So without a doubt, ROKBOX is the largest and most adaptable range of reusable crates on the market. And we're pretty proud of that. In short, we've tested all our products against the following: shock and drop from multiple heights and directions, topple from a full standing position, that forklift scenario that Andrew talked about, and not, a little 45-degree topple, which is what we know some of our competitors do. We literally were after those worst case scenarios. How do we protect against those? Plus, forklift impact at 3 miles an hour and a whopping 5 miles an hour, which apparently is not even fast in JFK Airport in the middle of the night. Vibration from 2.5 to 200 hertz, which are the frequencies most associated with transit. Water to mimic rainfall, as Andrew spoke about, the devastating consequences. Standing water to mimic the consequences of hurricanes, which we did in paddling pools. Changes in temperature, changes in humidity, plus we have weight loading limitations for all our crates and hardware with huge safety margins built in. In summary, because we could be here all day just talking about this element, we met, or in most instances, we far exceeded the performance of the wooden museum spec crates we were testing against. And to be fair, it's hardly surprising when you look at what our crates are made of. They're made of modern engineered materials. When we say modern, bear in mind, nerdy little fact, in 69, sorry, don't quote me on the year, Apollo 11 took Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin to the moon, and co. It wasn't made of wood, so why are we still using wood for crates? All of our testing data is available on our website, plus the information about how we did each and every test. And we have a ton of raw testing data that we give to interested parties when they ask for it. It is kind of migraine-inducing, but museum conservators love to see it, and so we share it with them. And here is a tiny snapshot of some of the testing that we did, which took months. Hope you enjoyed that. Along the way, we won a Red Dot Award, which is Best of the Best Design Award. You might not have heard of it. It's a German award, and it's more frequently associated with Porsche, Apple, and Bosch, and I think Ferrari have also won it. ROKBOX have as well. So briefly, to refer back to some of the claims Andrew mentioned and to add a bit of colour as to what the impact of our designs mean in the real world. Andrew spoke about the wrong size screws being used. That's not an issue in our crates because we have a T-clamp which can't be half in and half out. It's just fixed. Neither can it be removed by accident, just as these latches here can't be opened by mistake. You have to do two movements at the same time, like on a medicine bottle, you're pushing down and you're turning, or the reverse in a car, you push down and you move it into that reverse position. So there's a safety mechanism built in to protect against human error. Our crates are also predominantly tool-free. The ROKBOX Lite, you use a screwdriver on the outside, but essentially there's no need for screwdrivers around the works themselves, which means no well-meaning technician who's rushed off his feet is going to accidentally slip and knock the work. Our green and blue corners on the crates not only look good, but they also act like crumple zones on cars, which is one of the reasons we perform so brilliantly in those full topple tests. Andrew spoke of the painted and varnished crate being affected by water seeping in. It's really simple. Wood is absorbent. The materials we use aren't absorbent. Plus, there's gaskets, there's double seals going on. So there's just extra layers of protection built in all around. I will stop in a moment, I promise. Oh yes, thank you, Mithra. Images of that saturated wooden crate when we did some of that testing. And forklifts, 3 or 5 miles an hour. There's just no comparison. Commercial spec wooden crates and museum spec crates are punctured, whereas the ROKBOX Original and the ROKBOX Lite are simply dented, even the Lite. It's really amazing how it withstands that pressure. I could keep going for hours on this detail. We all have little favorite design features that do a really important job of protecting, but we're obviously around to chat later. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Harriet. Thank you.
Thank you, Verity. I'm Harriet. I am the Operations Director at ROKBOX, and I'm not actually from the art world. My background is from logistics and sharing economies, circular economies, so really relevant for sustainability, which is what I'm going to talk to you about today. Firstly, I want to thank Chris, who just actually did all my hard work for me, so I almost don't need to say anything now, but I'm going to go and repeat some of the stuff he said anyway. As you've heard, ROKBOX definitely protects artwork better than wood, but it's also better for the environment. Reuse by its very nature reduces waste. 67 tons to date of waste has already been removed by ROKBOX that we know. That's 4 train carriages of waste that hasn't gone into landfill. And we are just starting. There is so much more we can do. Art fairs, think of all the rubbish at the end, travelling exhibitions. Again, there's a huge amount of waste that ROKBOX can help get rid of. But what we do know in order to make a larger impact is that we need to change behaviour. The make, use, destroy model is really convenient and it's difficult to break, but it's not sustainable. We already do it to date. You think of all our water bottles that we have that we carry around with us. I bet most of you probably have coffee cups as well that you take around with you. And I know all of you use plastic bags at the supermarket that you reuse. I mean, I feel really sad when I have to go to a shop and I don't have a plastic bag. I'm like, I have to buy one. It's going to cost me 5p and it's going to go into my cupboard with all the other plastic bags that I have. So we know that we can do it, and we also know that single-use packaging has a finite life. We're already starting to see small changes. Small things are banned, small things are taxed. Think of plastic straws, single-use cutlery, plastic bags, another example. They are wasteful behaviour and they are going to get taxed, they are going to get penalised. So companies need to adopt sustainable habits to ensure that they don't end up being taxed or penalised. Reuse is one part of it. I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about reuse, but the other part of it is a full life cycle analysis. We asked some US academics and conservators to look at the full lifespan of a ROKBOX. We have reviewed the carbon spend that goes in travelling. Chris already mentioned that there's a huge amount that goes into moving things around, which is directly proportional to weight. The heavier something is, the more fuel it takes to move it around. So if we can strip out that weight, then suddenly air freight, sea freight, trucking is going to be much better, much lower carbon. ROKBOXes are really light. This one here, I encourage you to all come and try and pick it up. It weighs just 12 kgs. A traditional wooden case can weigh up to 120 kgs. So there's a 90% drop. I think there's a graph that Mithra is going to show you, which basically shows where that 90% comes from. Reuse is an important part of that, but also the weight is another important part. So it really helps to reduce your carbon footprint. Our life cycle analysis has also allowed us to look at our materials. We make sure that we use tough materials, durable materials, obviously, repairable materials so that we can repair cases, we're not throwing them away, and also recyclable. These light cases we made are fully recyclable and can go into your domestic recycling. They actually can get turned into yogurt pots at the end of their life. Very exciting. We've looked at the full lifespan. We've tried to keep things local. We produce things in the Midlands and the Netherlands, and we try not to ship things where possible. But I think all of you have heard about this before. I think you know about carbon footprint. I think you know about life cycle analysis. What I'm next going to talk about is something that I find really, really interesting. And this is the idea that we are not even starting to measure the right things. Carbon is just a really small part of what we should measure. There are, in fact, 10 other categories, which we can see on the graph up here, which we don't yet measure. These are things like acidification, respiratory effects, smog, toxicity, and ozone depletion. Now, these are things that we will and need to start measuring in the future. How we measure them is still being discussed by academics, but what we hope to do at some point is to create a calculator where you can see what your CO2 is, but also all these other environmental impacts, which make a really huge impact on our children's health and on all other elements of the planet. If you look at the graph, it may not be that clear, but all the little green and blue bits, that's ROKBOX. That's the impact we're making. All the big grey bits, they're single-use packaging. So it makes a really big difference. If one auction house, just one, did 10% of their shipments globally a year through ROKBOX, they would save 96 tons of waste going to landfill. That is one skip per week, and that's just one auction house. They would save 90% of the CO2 on those particular shipments. They would also save on those 10 environmental impacts that we are not yet recording. So what I want to leave you with is this idea that we're still learning about climate change. We don't really know its true impact. We don't really know what legislation is going to look like in the future, but we need to start preparing for it. Things do have to change if we want to hit those targets. I'd now like to hand over to Andrew, who's going to talk a little bit about the future of ROKBOX. Thank you.
So, we launched ROKBOX in 2019, and we've been selling ROKBOXes to fine art shippers, high-end blue-chip museums and galleries, you all know, and they've been using them for internal transfers, collections from studios, etc. Some collectors have bought loads of rock boxes just to store their prized assets in them, in stab-proof, waterproof packaging. Perhaps something had happened to one of their artworks. However, as you know, a lot of the art businesses, the auction houses, the galleries, the museums, art fairs, are simply nodes for the sale or exhibition of artworks. And the art world is inherently fractured and global. Artworks come from the consignor or artist to the auction house, to the gallery, to the art fair, from New York, from Paris, to London, to Hong Kong, and then go off to the buyer or to the new show in Zurich or Singapore. The artwork goes out of the box, but then with ROKBOX, you've got to get the empty box back. Everyone unanimously hates paying more for shipping. Everyone. And no one wants to ship empty boxes, which is where ROKBOX Loop comes in. ROKBOX with Gander and White, Haas & Co, Dietel, Helitrans, partnered and invested into the pooling of ROKBOXes, hundreds and hundreds of boxes available at their warehouses around the world, London, Paris, New York, LA, Miami, Singapore, Hong Kong, Chicago, etc., etc. 11 hubs on 3 continents so far and more coming. Art World participants are now renting ROKBOX for single journeys at the same or lower cost than single-use equivalents. And because we know where the boxes are going to and from, we can give them an accurate, reportable carbon reduction. Reusable, safer boxes where people want them, where they need it, when they need it. Loop has just launched. It is being used by the major auction houses, some international galleries, art advisories, and so far it has clocked up 6.7 tons CO2 saved and stopped tens of thousands of pounds of real money being spent on single-use cases. Yes, sorry, it's a first of its kind. Yes, there are other reusable boxes out there, we know about that, but they're not as good as ours, and they're not available as a service on a global scale like this. Crucially, Loop actually is a real collaboration. It is open to all the shippers, galleries, museums, collectors, etc., at the same prices on the same terms. Although, honestly, some of those shippers with case-making facilities are not very happy about all of this. Loop enables us to move away from a make, use, destroy model to a circular economy, and that is why it is being championed by AXA XL and backed by the Gallery Climate Coalition, and it's really quite exciting. Sorry. The art market in 2023 traded $63 billion worth of art, many millions of movements. It's estimated that there is $1 trillion of art insured globally, $1 billion in art insurance premium paid per annum, and it's estimated that losses for 2024 somewhere between $200 and $400 million. Hopefully there are no Hurricane Sandys, but if there are, we've got some waterproof boxes you could use. So you could be the biggest climate skeptic in the world, but spending 100 to 200 million a year on packaging and throwing 80 to 90% of it away, it's just wasteful, it's wrong, it's bad business, unless you're a traditional case maker. So we've covered why we created ROKBOX and ROKBOX Loop. We've shown you the evidence, how it's safer, more sustainable, and how it makes economic sense, and how now even the de facto competitors have invested into it to solve the problem. Loop is a new way of doing things, progressive, different, disruptive, because it's solving a huge problem. And despite the challenges that this system change brings, the benefits are clear and far-reaching. That's why we're so grateful to be here talking to you, who are not only knowledgeable, but well-connected, and frankly, very influential. We need your help to help us move the art shipping world forward. The upsides for you, less claims, less hassle, happier customers, and the downsides, some unhappy traditional case makers. So, that's it. Questions, challenges, we'll do a demonstration after. Does anyone have a question? Oh. Sorry, microphone. Yes, you need to have a microphone to answer, or it's not on the recording.
Thank you. Hi. You talked a bit about the kind of difficulties you faced during the testing process. Are there any other kind of main difficulties that you faced with ROKBOX?
Lots, yeah. Testing was challenging, as Verity said. It was iterative. The first boxes we made, they didn't work anywhere near as well as this. The other challenges are that there are a lot of people who would rather that we're not doing what we're doing. Case making is a huge revenue stream for a lot of companies, you can imagine. And so there are some people who frankly want us to go away and die, but we're not going to, because the world evolves, it changes. Other challenges, fear of the new. It's strange. You present people with what is clearly a better product. You give them a wooden box. They look at it and go, oh, it's strange. And probably lastly, the art world has lots of expertise in it. There's lots of experts who protect their jobs, who become experts through received wisdom and learned science. And they feel threatened by new things, and frankly speaking, people don't tend to do physics degrees and then go into the art world. So there's some strange science out there and the rest of it. I mean, that's some of the challenges. Sorry, yes, microphone for the nice woman in the nice blue jacket, please. Oh.
Sorry. These boxes have lifespans, right, as well? And so are you able to recycle parts of the boxes?
Absolutely, yes. We try to not throw stuff away. So the ROKBOX Original can at least do 100 journeys. The ROKBOX Lite can do at least 20 journeys. But the truth of it is, and you insurers will know this more than anyone, is that there is a huge difference between an amazing shipping company, Gander and White, going and picking up an artwork and packing it in Paris and flying it or moving it to London, than it is having a lesser shipping company pack an artwork in Delhi and move it to Azerbaijan. So different distances. If you throw it in a volcano, it will burn, right? So, but it's, yes. So it's recyclable, repairable. Sorry, there was a question.
What's the difference between ROKBOX Lite and ROKBOX, and when would one use the different one?
Great question. ROKBOX Original, which is this thing, was set up to sort of meet and break museum cases, right, to be better. And it uses the National Gallery of Washington Studies principle about having a floating panel. We can show you that later. And we always knew that the art world has these sort of two formats, if you like. There's the commercial centre who want everything cheap, 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 now, and the museum who all want safety and that kind of thing. COVID hit, and we'd launched the ROKBOX Original, and we'd won design awards, and we knew that we were good at making products. And so we created ROKBOX Lite, which is a more commercial spec case. So it's cheaper, it's lighter. Frankly speaking, having done all the testing on this, if you topple this, it is significantly better than the most expensive Tate National Gallery museum cases. So just by the mere nature of its materials, it's better. So people buy these, they put them in storage quite a lot. So this is what collectors like, stab-proof, pest-proof, and it's made out of this stuff. Crash helmets, everyone gets that. Protects your head. Any more questions? Loads.
Oh, hello. I think I know the answer to this, but do you...
Good.
Is there any sort of foams or anything used inside? Any other protections? Or is it not necessary?
So, again, this goes to what the kind of artwork is and where it's going and the type of thing is. They can be, so there are, Verity said, there are 3 different types of fixing systems. You can add extra foam if you've got a specially ornate foam, but we know that there's loads of expertise within the art world. There are amazing fine art shippers with great technicians. So they might add bits and conservators might all take it away. But no, you can stack a load of artworks in a box. You don't need to add any single-use packaging, and it will get there safer than the other way.
Thank you.
No problem.
With plastic, there's a chance of off-gas, like if you frame something and glaze it with plexi. What's the data on off-gassing?
So all the boxes are made out of medical-grade materials and don't off-gas. So we have a company that was built by people who develop medical technologies, So our testing criteria were to meet all those requirements. Funny enough, people talk about this sometimes and say, off-gassing. Have you ever done an oddity test on a wooden box? No. So the National Gallery of Washington study, which was done some time ago, was this big book on how to protect paintings, and it's a bit of a Bible in the industry. In the back of it, it makes a series of recommendations, and it says, if you were to make a new product, a new box, on the list of materials we suggest you don't use is wood. So yeah, it doesn't have gas. Yep. Ain't you?
Just to add to Andrew's point as well, we 6-7 years ago thought we'd be making ROKBOX out of recycled plastic, and the day we found out we couldn't, we were devastated. But the fact is, for exactly the reason you asked that question, recycled materials, it's not a sophisticated system at the moment for us to guarantee that where that plastic originally came from, you know, it could have had something dirty involved, and that could do something around the artwork. We have to use virgin materials right now, and it's because we're, you know, so cautious. We take every precaution going. There will come a point where it probably can be, but for that reason, which we totally respect, it has to be virgin right now. But obviously that's where the reuse and then the sophisticated recycling or the domestic recycling comes into its own. Thanks, Andrew.
Could I just ask, how long, if you had a ROKBOX Lite or the original, and you were a private collector that was buying for investing purposes,
Yeah.
and literally chucked it into storage, how many years on the shelf before anything really?
If this, so let's say we're talking a light, it's if the collector wanted to buy a crate, this is the more reasonable option. It's sat in fine art storage, it's not in direct sunlight that is going to, direct sunlight for years and years. You know, think about plastic objects in your garden, you know, kids' toys or something. At what point do they start to show the effects of deterioration? It takes years, and that's in baking sunshine, etc., etc. In fine art storage, and we do still say, fine art storage, fine art technicians, you're still using all the skills that the fine art shippers provide. It's going to sit in fine art storage and be safe for donkey's years. Yeah. Andrew, I know you want to say something. Yeah. Come on.
It will last a lot longer than wood, which eventually rots. Yes, please. Yes.
Thank you. I noticed that there's quite the focus on two-dimensional artworks. And so is it, as the company scales up, any research going into perhaps smaller scale, three-dimensional objects like ceramics kind of in the pipeline?
Yes, they get broken a lot, ceramics. Yes, so we started with two-dimensional art because it's roughly 70% of the stuff that goes through the market, and felt like it was going to be a quick win. But here we are, years and millions of pounds later. So we have been asked by the various parts of the art market, the auction houses, some of the museums, and we have developed a design brief about a modular three-dimensional system, which is quite an exciting thing, and we would love to deploy it. We need to raise the funds. We need to do the fundraising to get the money together to do it. But it's in the product pipeline. And it will be really cool. It all clips together and fits in content. It's beautiful.
And it would probably, you can already put multiple artworks in ROKBOX, but as you identify, you're limited by that depth. So let's say we had a 3D crate for sculpture, it also lends itself to being more of a multi-pack for 2D. So we're really keen to get there, but as Andrew said, it's one thing at a time.
We're a relatively small team. We're all here. There's 5 of us, so we've got a lot of work on. Yep. Any more? There really are questions.
Hi, here comes a dirty question.
Really
Cost. So you've got 2 crates there, and how do they compare to traditional wood crates of the same dimensions? And then with regards to the loop service, what are the cost factors there? How are you approaching all that?
So, Harry, I'm going to get you up here for a second. So, cost factor-wise, I'm terrible with numbers, names. You do that. You do it.
So we did a little case study on the cost, and what we found is that within 2 uses of the original case, you've got your money back. And with light, it's 1.5 uses. So the actual cost of the cases, this case here is £1,200 to purchase. But you're using 2 boxes, you pay about £600-700 to make a similar size wooden case. So 2 times, you're getting your money back. We have placed Loop, the rental service. We've got 3 different prices. There's a week, a month, and a 3-month pricing. And each of those, we aim for the month to be under the cost of what a wooden crate would cost, significantly. There might be a little bit more cost to warehouse, cost to back, but the handling fee itself is included as well. So that's very, very competitive on the rental side. Thanks.
Just as a general point, the company was started because of the amount of waste we were seeing and the insurance claims. But there's always been this third point, which was cost. We felt really strongly, like Andrew and I had worked on projects, sometimes for like the biggest and the best galleries, or he was setting up museums, etc., etc. But even when you work for those great companies, you don't always have the budget you need for a specific artwork or whatever. We didn't want people to have to compromise on protection or sustainability because of cost. So actually our manufacturing is also, we invest in tools, which means that the actual manufacturing can be done in such a way that we're always trying to make it affordable for people. So whilst we talk about, it wasn't a dirty question, for us that has also been this third thing. It's just the one we don't shout about as much.
I guess the actual ratio between value, the ratio between value potentially in the crates and the actual cost is negligible. So, you know, it's just trying to persuade people that are set in their ways, I guess, with wooden crates in that industry, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, exactly. Do you know what it is? So this was why Loop was so important to bring in, because we were selling to Christie's, to Sotheby's, to all the big auction houses, all the galleries. They don't have storage space, and they do not want to worry about inventory of cases. That is not what their expertise is. So what Loop was then to go to, you know, the Gander and Whites, the Hassenkos, and they can then run that inventory system. They can then run looking after boxes, because that's what they do already. So it's part of their process. But changing the behaviour, remembering that you can do this, remembering that you can rent something rather than just really quickly make a case, that's the bit that we're at now. We're trying to get people to be a little bit like, think slightly more before they do it. But you're right, it's going to be cheaper for them, and it's going to be better for the environment. Eventually, it will probably be significantly cheaper, because there will be those taxes and those extra costs on single-use packaging. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks ever so much. One of the things I hear quite a lot talking to transporters as to why clients won't use reusable is that they make last-minute changes all the time, even if they're warned about cost savings for sea freight. And it's kind of frustrating hearing that that's quite embedded. And I wondered how you think that they could be incentivised to look at more sustainable options.
Can I just make sure I've understood your question correctly? Are you asking what are the behavioural changes? How do we incentivise clients to make the behavioural changes to accommodate a reusable crate?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's it.
Good question. Part of it is us going out and chatting to people. I would say, in part, it is reassuring them that, let's say it's the Loop option, the rental, that when they book something, they don't actually need to know what's going to happen to the work when it gets to the client's house at the other end. We can cope with a change in plans, so they don't have to have like a crystal ball that tells them it's going to be unpacked and put on the wall straight away, and then the empty crate will be taken away. We can cope with the rental period being extended, that sort of thing, that flexibility that accommodates like the very human nature of the industry. Sorry, my brain's just gone.
Sorry, to your question, Joe, was that about incentivising the fine art shippers to use this kind of product more?
It was just, there was a conversation I had and I mentioned ROKBOX, and they said they gave the example of a shipment for a designer to Barbados, I think it was, and they'd been talking about the sea freight deadline is whenever, months ahead of time, and they said they were still getting massive changes to the consignment list right up to the last minute, and so they said, oh, it's just easier to use wooden crates, and so they were making vast quantities. So I was just curious, it's frustrating to see that really tightly embedded.
I'd say there's perhaps two elements that I could answer. And I remember sitting in galleries, it wasn't realistic for me personally in those days to have timelines that accommodated sea freight. Whether it's an artist, whether it's a curator, people are going to change their minds. It's a creative industry. It's what would do my head in when I was a registrar. It's also what gave me a real buzz. Like pulling that rabbit out of a hat to make that exhibition just so much more amazing when they decided to throw an extra work in that hadn't been seen in public for the last 50 years or something. So that's going to happen. But one of the reasons why I left my stable, enjoyable, 4-day-a-week job in an amazing gallery to join this crazy startup that has aged me like exponentially is because I would sit there at my old desk and think, it wouldn't work for this situation. Oh my God, that would have really helped me today. Okay, this would work here. And I could see the situation. So a classic one was whenever you needed to get an artwork somewhere urgently, it was always going to be a Friday afternoon. It would be a Friday afternoon when that Francis Bacon needed to be in New York yesterday. And if it had a crate, I didn't know where the crate was, or maybe there just wasn't a crate, or we had to pick a work up from a consignor's house. And if I was lucky, I have the artwork DIMS. I don't necessarily have the frame DIMS. And a ROKBOX, something off the shelf that was reliable, that was flexible, would have helped me so many times and meant, those Friday afternoons were not as crazy, or those SOS phone calls to the fine art shippers who were trying to leave their desks and then they're called to their packing department to make something at 6 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. So I think it plays a really vital role in not in changing behaviour, but also enabling people to continue working in a way they need to work in a commercial, fast-paced, exciting industry. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Very, very impressive answer.
I'll get down off my soapbox.
It's brilliant.